The UK's worst child killer in modern times.
Nurse trusted, convicted of killing 7 babies in her care.
A neonatal intensive care unit, the gentle beeping of monitors, the soft hum of incubators, a place where the most fragile lives begin their journey under the eyes of those sworn to protect them. Between 2015 and 2016, at the Countess of Chester Hospital in northwest England, something baffling began happening. Babies who were stable suddenly collapsed. Infants expected to recover mysteriously died. Premature newborns who were improving suddenly suffered catastrophic drops in oxygen levels and heart rates that defied medical explanation. Doctors were baffled, parents were devastated, and through it all, one figure remained constant: a neonatal nurse named Lucy Letby. Described by colleagues as dedicated and professional, by friends as caring and cheerful, she was the last person anyone would suspect of harming the vulnerable infants in her care. Today we're examining one of the most disturbing cases in British criminal history. As the infant death toll mounted, hospital consultants began to notice a chilling pattern. The babies weren't dying from natural causes, and the person who was always present when these tragedies occurred wasn't there to save lives. She was there to end them. Lucy Letby was born on January 4, 1990 in Chester, England. She grew up as an only child in Hereford, where friends and neighbors always described her as quiet and unremarkable. After completing her education at the local comprehensive school, Letby pursued her dream of becoming a nurse at the University of Chester. In 2011, she graduated with a nursing degree and began working at the Countess of Chester Hospital. She chose to specialize in neonatal care, perhaps the most delicate area of nursing, where patients weigh mere pounds and every procedure must be performed with extraordinary precision. At the hospital, Letby quickly established herself as competent and dedicated. Colleagues would later describe her as professional, very thorough, and hard-working. She was trusted not only to care for the most vulnerable patients, but also to train new staff members. In 2015, the hospital even used her image in a campaign to raise funds for a new neonatal unit. Outside work, Letby led what appeared to be a perfectly ordinary life. She bought her own home in Chester, not far from the hospital. She maintained close friendships, went on vacation with her parents, and attended social events with colleagues. Nothing in her behavior suggested anything unusual. Parents of babies in the neonatal unit often formed bonds with Letby. She would take photographs of infants for their families, create keepsake cards with babies, footprints, and comfort parents during their difficult moments. Some even kept in touch with her after their children were discharged. The neonatal unit itself was a specialized environment housing premature and ill newborns, some weighing less than a pound, others born with serious medical conditions. These tiny patients required constant monitoring and care, their fragility making them entirely dependent on their caregivers. No one could have imagined that among those dedicated caregivers was someone who had chosen this environment for a sinister reason. Its vulnerability made it a perfect hunting ground. June 2015 marked the beginning of what doctors would later recognize as a disturbing trend. A premature baby boy referred to in court as Child A unexpectedly collapsed and died just hours after birth. The following day, his twin sister, Child B, suffered a sudden and severe drop in oxygen levels but was fortunately resuscitated. Over the following months, the pattern continued. Previously stable infants would suddenly have declining health without apparent medical cause. The neonatal unit, which typically saw only 1 or 2 deaths per year, recorded 8 deaths in 2015 and 6 in 2016, a staggering increase. Dr. Stephen Breary, the lead consultant pediatrician, noticed something else. These unexplained collapses were happening during night shifts, and one nurse, Lucy Letby, was almost always present. By June 2016, the consultants began connecting the dots. They noticed that some babies developed strange discolored patches on their skin. Others showed sudden and unexplainable drops in blood oxygen. Some suffered sudden bleeding or breathing problems. Many of the infants who collapsed had just been fed. The medical team compiled their concerns and presented them to hospital management. Their message was clear. Something was very wrong, and it seemed to follow Letby's shifts. Initially, hospital executives were reluctant to act on what seemed like an unthinkable accusation against a valued staff member. They suggested conducting an internal review first, focusing on procedures and equipment rather than personnel. But the consultants were increasingly convinced. Dr. Ravi Jayaram, another pediatrician, had caught Letby standing over a baby's incubator as the infant's oxygen levels dropped. When she noticed him, she offered no explanation. By July 2016, the consultants delivered an ultimatum to hospital management: remove Letby from the neonatal unit or they would refuse to work with her. The hospital finally relented, moving her to clerical duties. But this action came too late for many families whose lives had already been shattered. In May 2017, nearly 2 years after the first suspicious death, the Countess of Chester Hospital finally contacted Cheshire Police. The hospital's medical director formally requested an investigation into the alarming number of infant deaths in the neonatal unit. What followed was one of the most complex medical investigations in British criminal history. Detectives from the Major Crime Unit began the painstaking process of reviewing thousands of pages of medical records, nursing logs, and hospital data. The investigation, codenamed Operation Hummingbird, quickly focused on 17 babies who had died or suffered serious harm between March 2015 and July 2016. Forensic investigators established a timeline for each case, mapping shifts, staff movements, and medical interventions. Amongst all of these, they noticed a disturbing pattern. Lucy Letby had been present during nearly every suspicious incident. When investigators analyzed work schedules, they found the mortality rate increased when she was working and dropped when she was on vacation. In July 2018, police made their move. Letby was arrested at her home in Chester on suspicion of murdering 8 babies and attempting to murder 6 others. After questioning, she was released on bail while investigations continued. Scientists examined medical equipment, medication vials, and feeding bags from the unit. They discovered evidence of tampering with IV bags and insulin injections. Medical experts reviewed each case, identifying similarities that defied coincidence. As evidence mounted, Letby was rearrested in June 2019 and again in November 2020 as investigators added more cases to their inquiry. Finally, on November 10, 2020, she was charged with multiple counts of murder and attempted murder. The case that would shock the entire United Kingdom was finally heading to court. As prosecutors built their case against Lucy Letby, the horrifying methods of her crimes came into focus. Medical experts claimed she had used various techniques to harm babies in ways that might appear natural or as medical complications. Her primary method was injecting air into babies' bloodstreams or stomachs, causing painful air blockages that led to cardiac arrests or severe breathing difficulties. In other cases, she administered insulin to healthy babies, causing dangerous drops in blood sugar levels. Some victims were deliberately overfed with milk through feeding tubes, causing them to vomit and inhale the fluid into their lungs. Particularly disturbing was Letby's apparent targeting of multiple births. In 3 cases, she attacked twins. In another, she targeted triplets, murdering 2 and attempting to kill the third on separate occasions. When police searched Letby's home, they discovered damning evidence. Hidden in a planner were handwritten notes that read, "I am evil, I did this." Another note simply stated, "I killed them on purpose because I'm not good enough to care for them." Investigators also uncovered a disturbing digital trail. Letby had searched for the parents of her victims on Facebook, sometimes just hours after their babies had died or collapsed. She had repeatedly looked up one family 21 times after their child's death. Expert witnesses testified to the unprecedented nature of the case. One consultant noted that the chances of so many babies suffering unexpected collapses naturally was astronomically small. Letby avoided detection through calculated behavior. She was often the one who discovered the babies in distress, calling for help and even assisting in resuscitation efforts. Her seemingly professional attitude and willingness to help diverted suspicion. She also targeted babies when staffing was minimal, especially during night shifts when consultant doctors were not present. By the time experts recognized the pattern, multiple families had already experienced unimaginable loss. On October 10, 2022, at Manchester Crown Court, one of the longest and most disturbing criminal trials in British history began. Lucy Letby, now 32 years old, faced 22 charges, 7 counts of murder and 15 counts of attempted murder involving 17 babies. Prosecutor Nick Johnson KC laid out the case against Letby in stark terms. A poisoner was at work in the neonatal unit, he told the jury. For 10 months, the prosecution carefully presented their evidence. Medical experts testified that the collapses and deaths represented a clear pattern of deliberate harm. Nursing records placed Letby at the scene of each incident. Consultants described their growing concern as more babies unexplainably crashed during her shifts. Perhaps most heartbreaking was the testimony from parents. One father described walking into the neonatal unit to find Letby standing over his dying child. A mother recalled how Letby had tried to comfort her after her baby's death, a baby she now stood accused of murdering. Throughout the trial, Letby maintained her innocence. Her defense argued that the babies had died from natural causes or poor hospital conditions. They suggested she was being scapegoated for systemic failures at the hospital. After 22 days of deliberations, one of the longest jury considerations in UK criminal history, the verdicts finally came on August 18, 2023. Lucy Letby was found guilty of murdering 7 babies and attempting to murder 6 others. The jury could not reach verdicts on 6 additional charges. As the verdicts were read, Letby showed no emotion. She had refused to attend court for the final days of the trial, choosing not to face the families whose lives she had destroyed. On August 21, 2023, Justice James Goss delivered his sentence. Lucy Letby would serve a whole life order, the most severe punishment in the British legal system, making sure she would never be released from prison.
Over a period of just under 13 months, you killed 7 fragile babies and attempted to kill 6 others. Some of your victims were only a day or a few days old. By their nature and number, such murders and attempted murders by a neonatal nurse entrusted to care for them are offences of very exceptional seriousness. Lucy Letby, on each of the 7 offences of murder and the 7 offences of attempted murder, I sentence you to imprisonment for life. Because the seriousness of your offences is exceptionally high, I direct that the early release provisions do not apply. The order of the court, therefore, is a whole life order on each and every offence, and you will spend the rest of your life in prison.
The empty dock where Letby should have stood symbolized her final act of cowardice. She had refused to appear for her sentencing or hear the impact statements from devastated parents. You acted in a way that was completely contrary to the normal human instincts of nurturing and caring for babies, Justice Goss stated to the absent defendant. You have caused deep psychological trauma. In emotional impact statements, parents described the devastating toll of Letby's crimes. One mother said she still suffered panic attacks. A father spoke of how their family had been living in a nightmare that no one can wake up from. In the aftermath, serious questions emerged about the hospital's handling of the case. Why had administrators delayed involving police despite the consultant's urgent warnings? Why was Letby allowed to continue working after early concerns were raised? The UK government announced an independent inquiry into how Letby had been able to kill repeatedly without earlier intervention. The hospital executives who had dismissed initial concerns faced calls for accountability. For the medical community, the case represented a significant breach of trust. Hospitals across Britain reviewed their safety protocols, particularly around tracking unexpected incidents and staff patterns. For the families, no verdict could restore what they had lost. But the knowledge that Letby would never again be free to harm another child provided at least the cold comfort of justice served. The case of Lucy Letby reminds us that evil can hide behind the most trusted faces, in the places we least expect to find it. even in the hands meant to nurture and protect our most vulnerable. As Lucy Letby serves her life sentence in prison, the families of her victims continue to search for answers that may never fully come. Share your thoughts on this devastating case in the comments below. What warning signs do you think were missed? Which tragic case should we examine next? Remember to subscribe and hit the notification bell to uncover more stories of justice served that remind us that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones we never suspect until it's too late. Because even in our safest spaces, vigilance can mean the difference between life and death.